I still remember the sound more than the pain. The slap cracked through the church so loudly that every conversation stopped mid-sentence. 180 guests turned toward me at once. The violinist froze. My maid of honor dropped her bouquet. Even the priest stood speechless. My hand flew to my cheek. And there stood my mother. Her chest heaved with rage, her eyes burning as if she were staring at a stranger instead of her own daughter. "No daughter of mine wears that," she screamed. The words echoed against the stained glass windows. For a moment, nobody moved. Then whispers exploded across the room. I stood at the altar in the wedding dress I had spent months choosing. It wasn't revealing. It wasn't inappropriate. It was elegant, ivory white, with lace sleeves and a modest neckline. Yet my mother looked at it as though it were evidence of a crime. Beside me, my fiancé Ethan stepped forward. "Mrs. Bennet, what are you doing?" "Stay out of this," she snapped. My father rushed toward her. "Linda, stop." But she wasn't listening. Her trembling finger pointed directly at my dress. "You cannot marry him wearing that dress." Tears burned behind my eyes. "Mom, what are you talking about?" For a second, I thought she might explain. Instead, her face went pale. A strange fear flashed across her eyes. Then she turned and ran out of the church. Just ran. Leaving everyone stunned. Leaving me humiliated in front of everyone I loved. And leaving behind a mystery that would destroy our family. At the time, I thought my mother had simply lost control. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because 3 days later, detectives arrived at my door. And 2 weeks later, my mother would stand in a courtroom and confess to something she had hidden for 26 years. Something that explained everything. Including the slap. The wedding continued after nearly an hour of chaos. Everyone tried to pretend nothing had happened. But nobody could. Not me. Not Ethan. Not the guests. Every smile felt forced. Every congratulation carried curiosity behind it. By the reception, rumors were spreading. Some thought my mother hated Ethan. Others thought she'd suffered a breakdown. A few even whispered that she'd been drinking. But none of those theories fit. Because my mother wasn't unstable. She was controlled. Organized. Careful. The kind of woman who planned Christmas 6 months early. The kind who ironed bedsheets. The kind who never lost control. Yet she had slapped me in front of nearly 200 people. For a dress. Or so it seemed. That night, after the guests left, Ethan held me while I cried. "You don't think she's losing her mind, do you?" I asked. "No." "Then why did she do it?" He hesitated. "I don't know." Neither of us slept. The next morning I called her. No answer. Again. No answer. Again. Voicemail. The same thing happened all day. By evening, my father called. His voice sounded exhausted. "She won't come out of her room." "What?" "She locked herself inside." "Dad, what's happening?" There was a long silence. Then he whispered something that chilled me. "She keeps saying she ruined everything." The next 3 days became stranger. My mother refused visitors. Refused calls. Refused food. Then came the knock. 2 detectives stood outside our apartment. "Are you Olivia Bennet?" "Yes." "We'd like to ask a few questions." My stomach tightened. "About what?" The older detective exchanged a glance with his partner. "Your mother." I felt cold. "What happened?" "May we come in?" The next hour changed my life. The detectives asked questions about my childhood. About my parents. About family photographs. About old documents. About my birth certificate. Then came the question that made my heart stop. Has your mother ever discussed the possibility that you were adopted? I laughed. Actually laughed. Of course not. Neither detective smiled. My laughter died instantly. What are you talking about? The older detective opened a folder. Inside were photographs. Old photographs. Hospital records. Legal documents. And one image that shook me to my core. A younger version of my mother. Holding a newborn. The date on the photograph was nearly 9 months before I was supposedly born. I stared. My mind refused to process it. That's impossible. The detective leaned forward. We don't believe it is. The room began spinning. I looked at Ethan. He looked as horrified as I felt. No, I whispered. No. But deep inside, something already knew. Something felt terribly wrong. The investigation unfolded quickly. Too quickly. Within days, reporters appeared outside my parents' house. Neighbors whispered. Friends called. Relatives demanded answers. Then DNA testing was ordered. I still remember sitting in that sterile laboratory. Still remember praying. Please let this be a mistake. Please. 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 But the results arrived 2 weeks later. And they shattered everything. Linda Bennett was not my biological mother. Neither was my father. Neither of them. I wasn't their daughter. Not biologically. Not legally. Nothing. I felt as though the floor vanished beneath me. The people who raised me. Loved me. Tucked me into bed. Celebrated birthdays. Comforted me through heartbreak. They weren't my parents. At least not by blood. When the truth reached the authorities, everything exploded. A decades-old investigation reopened. Records were examined. Hospitals searched. Witnesses questioned. And eventually they found her. My biological mother. A woman named Sarah Collins. She lived only 3 hours away. 3 hours. For 26 years. The first meeting remains impossible to describe. She cried before she even entered the room. The moment she saw me, her knees nearly gave out. My God. Those were her first words. My God. I saw my own eyes in hers. My own smile. My own face. It was like staring into another version of myself. We talked for hours. Then came the question. The question that haunted her for 26 years. What happened to my baby? And finally, investigators discovered the answer. 26 years earlier, Sarah had given birth in a small private clinic. She was young. Unmarried. Terrified. During labor, complications occurred. She lost consciousness. When she woke up, doctors told her baby had died. She never saw the body. Never held her child. Never got to say goodbye. Because there was no body. Because the baby hadn't died. The baby had been taken. Me. Someone had paid for a newborn. Someone desperate for a child. Someone willing to commit a crime. My mother. Linda. The woman who raised me. The woman who slapped me at my wedding. The woman who loved me. And stole me. The evidence became overwhelming. Witness testimony. Financial records. Medical documents. A retired nurse finally confessed. Years earlier, Linda had suffered multiple miscarriages. She became obsessed with having a child. Obsessed. When she learned of a corrupt doctor running illegal infant transfers, she paid him. The baby was delivered. Sarah was told her daughter died. And Linda went home with me. For 26 years nobody knew. Until my wedding. Until the dress. The dress turned out to be the key. Because it wasn't the dress itself. It was where it came from. Weeks before the wedding, I had visited a vintage boutique. There, I found antique lace that was incorporated into my gown. The lace had originally belonged to Sarah's family. My biological family. The odds were nearly impossible. Yet somehow, fate had brought it back to me. When Linda saw it at the altar, she recognized it instantly. The same lace she'd seen wrapped around me as an infant. The same lace that had haunted her nightmares for decades. At that moment she realized the truth was coming. And she panicked. The slap wasn't about the dress. It was about guilt. 26 years of guilt. 3 months later, the trial began. The entire city watched. News stations covered every development. And I sat in the courtroom every day. Torn apart inside. Because I hated what she'd done. But I couldn't stop loving her. How do you stop loving your mother? Even after learning she stole you? How? Nobody teaches you that. Then came the final day. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined every wall. Sarah sat beside me. Ethan held my hand. And Linda took the stand. She looked older. Smaller. Broken. The prosecutor asked a simple question. Did you knowingly participate in the illegal removal and transfer of Sarah Collins' child? Silence filled the room. Everyone waited. Linda looked directly at me. Tears streamed down her face. Then she spoke. Yes. Gasps erupted. But she wasn't finished. Yes, I did. Her voice cracked. I knew exactly what I was doing. Sarah began crying. I felt my chest tighten. Linda continued. I wanted a baby so badly that I convinced myself love would justify anything. She looked toward Sarah. I destroyed your life. Then she looked at me. And hers. The courtroom was silent. You trusted me to be your mother, she whispered. And I built that relationship on a crime. I couldn't breathe. I slapped her at the wedding because I saw the lace. She held up a trembling hand. The same lace wrapped around her when I first saw her. The room remained frozen. I realized God had finally caught me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I spent 26 years pretending the truth wouldn't find me. She lowered her head. But it did. The judge asked whether she wished to add anything further. Linda nodded. Then came the confession nobody expected. There is one more thing. Everyone leaned forward. I never stopped keeping records. The prosecutor frowned. What records? She opened a folder. Inside were hundreds of letters. Hundreds. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every major milestone. Letters written to Sarah. Letters she never sent. Letters describing my life. My first steps. My first words. My first day of school. My graduation. Everything. Linda sobbed openly. I knew she deserved to know. Sarah covered her mouth. The courtroom erupted into tears. Even the judge struggled to maintain composure. For 26 years, guilt had consumed her. Every moment of my life had been documented. Preserved. Recorded. Not because she planned to reveal the truth. But because she couldn't bear carrying it alone. When sentencing arrived, nobody celebrated. Nobody won. Sarah lost 26 years. I lost certainty about my identity. Linda lost everything. The judge acknowledged her confession and cooperation but also the unimaginable harm caused. Justice was served. But healing would take far longer. A year later, life looked very different. Sarah became part of my life. Slowly. Carefully. Not as a replacement. But as another piece of who I am. My father, who had genuinely believed Linda's lies, remained in my life too. And surprisingly, so did Linda. Not in the same way. Not as before. But she remained connected. Because despite everything, she had raised me. Loved me. Protected me. Her love had been real. The crime had been real too. Both things could exist at once. That's what made it so painful. Sometimes people ask whether I forgave her. The answer is complicated. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a process. A choice made repeatedly. But I know this. The slap that humiliated me on my wedding day felt like the worst moment of my life. Yet if it hadn't happened, the truth might never have surfaced. I might never have met Sarah. I might never have learned who I really was. And Linda might have taken her secret to the grave. Instead, a single moment of panic exposed 26 years of lies. And in a crowded courtroom, the woman who stole me finally told the truth. Not because she was caught. But because she could no longer bear the weight of silence. And as she finished her confession, tears streaming down her face, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in my entire life, my mother, both of my mothers, were finally telling me the truth. And that truth, painful as it was, became the beginning of everything that came next.